Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the HawksZone Rundown in our spinoff show, Pulse of the Hawks with Mookie Alexander. Tonight, we're going to kind of cover everything. It's an open discussion with me and Mookie on kind of what this team's going to be going through this offseason. You know, we'll touch on everything from QBs in the draft potentially to, guys on defense that we bring back or not, coaching changes that may happen, and even talk a little bit John Schneider. And we'll touch a bit on the Rams game coming up on Sunday, but we'll kind of get, your guys' feedback, what you guys want to kind of talk about on this show, and we'll answer your questions throughout. So right after this, on the other side, Mookie Alexander with Pulse of the Hawks.
Well, I'm the best corner in the game.
For this run. Get off me.
DK. Hey, it's John Schneider with the Seattle Seahawks.
And Washington's got a win. Leon Washington. Smith and Jimbo. The Seahawks are going to hold the NFC Championship.
Every year, the NFL does. Is it going to be another 9-8?
Mike Macdonald got to finish something.
They have to fix the offensive
Part of his success and part of
ambition of being the LOB
One a year, that's trading DK Metcalf.
Trade him aggressive.
This is the HawksZone Rundown with Ryan and Bryce.
Mookie, how's it going, man? Oh, you're muted, Mookie. There you go.
Yeah, it's a very muted response for me after what happened yesterday and throughout the week. Really, the season ended Saturday night, but Sunday was just to pull the plug. I guess this could be like a 20-second show because we could go, what's the pulse of the Hawks? Well, the patient has flatlined. There will be no revival. Long live the 2024 Seahawks.
Yeah, man, that was rough. I think the roughest one for me was watching Kyler Murray and the Cardinals when he threw the ball off McBride's head. Like, they're down there. A red zone interception ends the Seahawks season to an extent. And then the other one was the just horrible clock management by the Falcons the other night when, Darnell Mooney catches that ball and they blow, 15 seconds almost off the clock instead of taking a timeout. Just ironic things that have caused the end to the Seahawks season. So, let's kind of jump into a little bit. Maybe we'll just touch on this game coming up because there's not much really to talk about with this game versus the Rams. Based on Mike Macdonald's kind of pre-game press conference, it sounds like he tends to win. He tends to play everybody. It doesn't seem like they're going to roll with the backups, which there were a lot of people on Twitter today saying, or yesterday about, hey, give Sam Howell, Jaron Hall a go. Sounds like they're going to go with Geno and go out to win. What are your thoughts on that philosophy at this point, or would you like to see some more of the backup guys that we're not so sure about get some run this weekend?
I wouldn't mind seeing a lot of the backups out there just to give them some run and not risk what happened to, like, say, Quandre Diggs a couple of years ago, where Seattle really didn't have any incentive to play for anything but pride against Arizona, and I guess to be a spoiler, which is what happened. They denied Arizona the NFC West title that year, the 2021 season. But nevertheless, if they had gone with Howell and played Christian Haynes, started him and all that, I think I would have been totally fine. Just let them have a run at it. But I also know that this is a business, and Geno Smith's got incentives. Still got Jackson Smith and Jigba potentially breaking the Seahawks franchise record. It could be Tyler Lockett's final game, not just in a Seahawks uniform, maybe his NFL career. So the other part of me, the fan in me, is saying, I just want to see my top players on my favorite team play one more time and then just hope for the best. And, of course, for them to win. So McDonald's saying that they're going to try to win the game. You can't really do that and play a bunch of backups unless the Rams are going to be playing the 6th and 7th stringers. They're going to be plucking fans from the stands or something. So I guess McDonald is that kind of coach where he's going to push for 10 wins and say, hey, first season, 10-win season. And it's a bit of a rarity to miss the playoffs with a 10-win team. It's only happened 29 other times since the merger. And that's factoring in we used to have 14-game seasons and 8 teams in the playoffs total. So Seattle will be the first, if they win this Sunday, the first team in the 14-team playoff era to miss the playoffs. So it's just kind of a bad luck thing in that sense. But, it's stuff to build on for next year from McDonald's sense. And it's his first year as a head coach. So I don't think he just wants to throw away a game necessarily just so that he can quote, evaluate guys who, whether they play or not, probably not going to be on the team anyway.
Yeah, no. When I look at this situation, people have talked about the Sam Howell situation, like let him or Jaron Hall play. I'm not in favor of that. I'd rather see this team go out on a high note, winning, help build that culture, that kind of, attitude behind, what they're trying to build here. But there are some guys I'd say on the defensive side I'd be okay seeing, like Nehemiah Pritchett. I'd like to see him get some more run out there at corner. He's been a healthy scratch a few times. And Christian Haynes on offense. Like, what you have in Lincoln Tomlinson at this point. Like, give Christian Haynes a couple reps at left guard and see if you have something there potentially. And obviously I want to see Kenny McIntosh get more touches as, he's really kind of surprised me in some aspects. I was a big Kenny McIntosh fan when he came out of Georgia. But then obviously he didn't play much last year due to injury. And then this year he kind of basically rode the bench until K9 got hurt. But he's definitely kind of brought some, and spark to that running back room. It's hard because I don't know how to gauge this year. I don't know if this, some people okay, Mike Macdonald won, he's got a winning record as a first-year head coach, but it was supposed to be, we put in a new coach and everything was supposedly supposed to get better, right? Remember we talked about in the offseason, hey, this offense is ready to go. We need to get our defense to a certain standard. And it's like it Freaky Friday'd itself, and our offense is now in shambles, and our defense is, finishing the year probably as a top 10 unit. So it'll be interesting to see kind of where this team goes in the offseason and how much pressure John Schneider gets kind of put under. But I expect in this game versus the Rams on Sunday for Seattle to win, because I don't know how many guys the Rams are really going to play on their end. And we'll see how this season wraps up.
Yeah, and you know what? The Rams, they're either going to be the 3 or the 4 seed, and because Tampa Bay can get the 3 seed with a win, and they're in the 10 a.m. window, and they're going to beat New Orleans. So almost certainly going to beat New Orleans. So if they win, they're going to win the division. They would have a tiebreaker on the Rams if Seattle beats the Rams. So that would drop the Rams to 4. So Seattle, in a way, could manipulate who the Rams play in the first round. And if it's the 3 seed, they might play Washington. So the team that just knocked the Seahawks out officially, we could end up just pulling for them we could be pulling for Quinn and Bobby to knock the Rams out. The alternative is the Rams drop to the 4 seed, and they're going to play whoever loses the Minnesota-Detroit game.
Right.
And that's also a tough matchup, but they also beat Minnesota already. And they took the Lions to overtime, and that was a much healthier Lions team. So if the Seattle outcome by any chance influences the Rams' path and the choose your own adventure, and that leads the Rams to a first-round exit, I will be very, very satisfied. But yes, I'd like to see them give it a good effort. I hope that the rest can help Geno in particular, because not that there's any particular need to discuss the Bears game, but he was clearly hobbled off the short week in ways that he didn't even look in the Vikings game. So just the short rest for everybody to just recharge. I know they're disappointed from what happened last weekend with all the other results, but just give us something positive so we can remember the season a little more on a happy note compared to really just the Bears game in itself. It was just a bunch of blech. To me, the offense has got to end it on a happier note. The defense is a different story. Defense is generally ending the season on a high note. But the offense, if this is going to be Ryan Grubb's farewell, go out with a bang. Don't give us the same stuff. Otherwise, they might as well just announce he's as good as gone, like as soon as the press conference is over.
Yeah, so let's kind of get into some of our topics tonight, Mookie, and obviously everyone get your comments in. Me and Mookie are going to be here. We're going to answer your guys' comments for sure. This is a really open forum tonight. We've got a couple topics we're going to touch on, but really we want to hear from you guys as well. So first things up, off-season priorities for 2025, Mookie. What are your top 3 off-season priorities for the Seahawks?
So if we're going to do all-encompassing and include the draft, so
Yes, draft, free agency, coaching, everything. What are your 3 main things you want to see the Hawks do in this offseason in 2025 that you think will set them up for a better 2025 season?
Number 1 priority, do a much better offensive coordinator search. Like I don't see how Grubb comes back from this. The offense, the running game has gotten a little bit better since the bye week. The passing game has significantly gotten worse, and that is really concerning to me. Like Gino's gotten worse. His interceptions have been ridiculous for the most part, and the near interceptions too. The offensive line's still struggling, and there are just too many plays where the spacing is so bad, and that there are no layers to Grubb's passing game. And I got the Lions 49ers game on my screen right now, and on the other screen, and it's just a play action clinic from a 6-9 49ers team playing 3 backup offensive linemen, and maybe the best team in the NFC. And they're just doing so many things differently that Grubb doesn't seem to be equipped to do, and the Seahawks roster doesn't seem to be equipped to do for a variety of reasons. So offensive coordinator, if they can get the next scheme lord, so to speak, I think that would be the best case scenario. I'm talking about Kevin O'Connell as a head coach of the Vikings, but I also think about Liam Cohen, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offensive coordinator, because he's also from the Sean McVay system. And their play action game went from bad last year. The running game was bad last year to now Baker Mayfield is having like a 40 touchdown season. He's having an incredible year, and their offense is really, really dangerous. So if you can get a scheme lord who can get even the fifth stringers open, I would love that, because it would also change perhaps how this roster could be constructed. Priority number 2, offensive line. And I think those go hand in hand. So we're going to have to assume that Cross and Lucas are set at tackle. Even, a subset within that, of course, is Cross. Are you going to pick up that 5th-year option? With Lucas, that's not a question because he wasn't a first-round pick. But those 2, at the very least, are your starters in 2025. And it's good to me that Lucas has gone this many games without his knee acting up again like it did last year. Interior offensive line. Do not re-sign Tomlinson. Like this stopgap stuff that they do every time they let one of their draft picks walk, and then just sign. They try to put scotch tape over a leaking dam, and it's just a terrible thing to do. So either move Haynes to left guard, or move LeMayo to left guard, or draft another guard. Just have somebody different there. Center, competition for Oluwatimi, because I think he's had some iffy moments too. And then right guard, I'm not sure Bradford's a lock for this roster. And of course, he's going to end the season on IR. You could keep LeMayo there. You could see what Christian Haynes does at right guard, but keep your options open. I know they've got guys available through the last couple of years worth of drafts, but keep drafting offensive linemen. And as you've said repeatedly, develop them. And if you can develop them and have some continuity at certain positions, like if you believe in LeMayo, who's looked good for the most part, then keep him there. Keep developing him, and he could be like a hidden gem on the offensive line. The number 3, this is going to be a little controversial, but not cut Geno, but make a decision on Geno Smith and the quarterback position in general. And that is not just for the 2025 season, if you get what I'm saying. It's like, yes, it affects the 2025 season, but the decision you make with Geno Smith in 2025 is not just for 2025, but also, is he going to be your quarterback? Do you believe in him in 2026, 2027, however? Are you going to extend him? Are you going to restructure his contract? Are you going to do a 2-year extension or a 3-year, whatever? If you move on from Geno, what are you going to do? Are you going to keep Sam Howell? Are you going to trade for a quarterback? Are you going to make an aggressive play for Sam Darnold if the Vikings do not re-sign him? So all of those options are going to be on the table. And the decision that Schneider does make should immediately impact our expectations for the 2025 season. In other words, if you keep Geno and you unequivocally say Geno's going to be your starter, then actually build around him. And the fact that we're having the same conversation with Geno the way we had with Russell Wilson those last few years is really asinine to me. Like get him a proper offensive line, get him a running game again, all that stuff. But if you move on from Geno, decide to go rookie quarterback or reclamation project, we as fans should not expect a particularly grand season or anything close to the playoffs. It becomes a bonus if it happens.
Yeah, no, Mookie, I agree with basically everything you said, and it's almost the exact same order I have as well. As first off, find an OC, and I think the biggest issue that hurt Seattle in that search this year was Macdonald got hired very late. There have been multiple reports and people I've talked to with connections that, Arthur Smith was his guy. That was the guy he had pegged initially to be his OC, but Arthur Smith couldn't wait out the period it took to hire Mike Macdonald. So, there's one. Then they tried to get Kafka. He came in for head coaching. They tried to get him, and the Giants inevitably blocked him, which, I was talking with Dan Vians about that last night. He didn't even end up calling plays this year in New York. They changed that before the season started, that Dayball was going to take over. So, yeah, I think they need to really go out and get a guy that is going to be able to build a staff around him that has NFL, kind of pedigree, that's been in the league for 10 plus years, that knows people, that can bring people along with them. And then, yeah, I agree. Fix the O-line. And it depends, too, for me, because I look at it this way with the O-line. You can't keep saying, and this is the thing that bugs me the most, and, with the development side of it, we keep going, can we draft? We need to draft guys. We need to go get, like people already talked about Booker, Ratledge, these other guys that are in this draft. And it's like, okay, we've done this draft. I worry that we don't know how to identify offensive linemen and draft and develop them. Like, it's been an ongoing issue. We draft Mark Glowinski. We can't do anything with him here. We trade him away, and all of a sudden he ends up being a Pro Bowler on the Colts. And, it's just an ongoing kind of joke here in Seattle with our development of O-line. I'd rather see them go out and, okay, you got some guys. We got them last year, Mike Jarrell, Amaya, Haynes, bring in a competition, like you said, for Olu, but go get some established and not a Laken Tomlinson. Go get some guys. And everyone always talks about free agency and the draft to get linemen. Go trade if you have to trade, John Schneider. You traded for Dwayne Brown. That was a good trade. We got a solid left tackle when we needed to get one, and Dwayne did well for a good 5-year period here in Seattle. I'd be okay if Seattle turned around and I saw, at the end of the year and free agency hits, Seattle's made a trade for Wyatt Teller out of Cleveland or someone like that, where that you're going to get an above average player at a position and bring him in and have him help stabilize that O-line. And then, the third thing is Geno and the quarterback spot. I don't want to hear John Schneider come out at the end of this year's draft and go, well, and John, you say every offseason you want to draft somebody. Take a freaking shot on somebody at some point. There's not going to be some perfect quarterback messiah that's going to fall in your lap in the draft, especially where we draft in the first part. This draft isn't great for quarterbacks, at least for guys that are going to come in immediately and make an impact. I have a list of guys we're going to go over in a little bit, of guys that I'm kind of intrigued with that you could take between rounds 3 and 6 and develop them and could potentially push Sam Howell as a backup. But they need to kind of get off get out of the boiling water and make a decision on what's going on with Geno Smith, because I agree. If they view this team as a contending team, which I'm not sure they are, and when I say contender, NFC Championship game plus, I don't know if Geno's the right guy for that. And I'm a big Geno guy. I've got his jersey behind me. I really, kind of fell into the Geno camp throughout this year. I really started to understand what he was going through with this offensive line and the play calling and how bad it was. But Geno's also 35, and that's the biggest thing against Geno right now is his age. And, he's made some poor decisions this year, and lots of people have talked about it. And the red zone interceptions are hard things to say, to blame blame Grubb for all the time. Geno's made some very bad decisions with the football. I think you need to find his bridge. Who are you bridging to? Because we haven't bridged to anybody. It was never going to be Drew Lock, and it's not going to be Sam Howell. So who are you bridging to? If you bring if they do decide to bring Geno back, then I agree, build around him, but you have to start finding that bridge. Who are you going to next? Because Geno is not going to be the quarterback of the Seattle Seahawks when he's 40. That's not the way to do this. That's not a good franchise move at all. They have to find some sort of guy that either can learn behind Geno, take over from him in a year or two. It'll be interesting. And I don't know. Those are kind of, I'm agree with you. Those are the priorities for this team this year. The defense, a lot of it comes back. It's more who don't you want back on the defense, which that's a kind of another question to ask, right? So let's go into that one. Who do you bring back the whole defense intact, or are there guys you move on from?
Yeah, so I'm just pulling up the unrestricted free agents for 2025 through Over the Cap. Jaron Reed, I was wondering if he would actually be a lock for this roster at the start of camp, because I'm going, okay, 2-year deal, his contract situation, maybe they just move on from him or something. But he's played well. And defensive linemen, interior defensive linemen, as we've seen with somebody like Calais Campbell, they can play deep into their 30s and still be pretty effective. So Jaron Reed's 33. You can get him back on a 1 or 2 year deal. That's fine. I think you can keep Reed. Hankins, you notice he's playing less. So forget about him. Then you've got Kayvon Wallace. Don't need to keep him. Travis Gibson, bad trade. And it was obvious why they acquired him because of Nwosu, but bad trade, didn't work out. Ernest Jones, you have to extend him. I think they're obligated to, because I don't want to do this song and dance of searching for linebackers again. I think Josh Joe being a restricted free agent, it plays into Seattle's hands, because now you can go the way that he's played and the way that he's been able to usurp Trey Brown in the starting lineup. That means that Brown is as good as gone. So I think you keep Job around, and then you get to like basically practice squad level guys. So if they're going to talk about, I don't know, let's say Rick Woolen, if there is an offer for Woolen that is high, like a day 2 pick, I think they could consider it, because for me, it's not like Woolen is a bad player. I'm seeing it in the comments already. Rick is not a bad player. Most of the time, he's very good, and he's got excellent ball skills most of the time. Again, there's that Rams game is going to stick in my craw for multiple reasons. Geno's pick 6, and Woolen as a former wide receiver not attacking the ball on that overtime pass. But it's just that when he loses focus, when he just screws around with effort, tackling people, that annoys me a lot more, and it annoys coaches more. Like, if you have the ability and then just commit mental mistakes or don't give 100%, then you're going to fall on the bad side of the coaches. And the fact that he got benched, of course, for the off the field stuff, which is nothing egregious, but it's still, something that you bank, that 2 coaches have now benched him for a few snaps for on-field and off-field reasons. So Woolen's a question mark. I think Uchenna Nwosu is going to unfortunately have to be the potential cap casualty, because Derek Hall's development kind of changed things. And there's somebody in the comments, Brian Myers, talking about need an edge or pass rusher that other teams need a game plan for. And no, I wouldn't use a round 1 pick on a pass rusher. It's a good draft for pass rushers, it seems, but nothing overly deep. I do think that Seattle does need a guy who's capable of getting like 14, 15 sacks, and like Mafia and Hall are probably not that kind of player, but they're still developing. There's the chance that it could happen. Nwosu's cap hit is pretty significant, and the injuries, I think, may sap him of his prime early. It's unfortunate as it is to say, but if they keep him, fine. Roy Robertson Harris could also be a cap casualty too. But like everybody else, the core, Witherspoon, Love, obviously Byron Murphy, Tyrus Knight, Extender Ernest Jones, of course, like those guys you can keep around. We're not having to replace the safeties all over again. And that's another thing. Rayshawn Jenkins might also be somebody that, if he doesn't stay in his third safety role, like the big nickel, he could be just as easily a cap casualty too. But I'm fine if he stays around as that big nickel, because Kobe Bryant has been a big revelation as the other safety alongside Julian Love. So yes, it sucks that they missed the playoffs and all that, but I'm very happy that this defense did not collapse onto itself in ways that the last few peak defenses managed to do. Like, they've got something there, and you can see more of Macdonald's vision on that side with what they want to do as far as marrying their pass rush with their coverage. There are going to be mistakes here and there. They're not there yet. They're not a great defense yet, but the fact that they're good is already a vast improvement from really just the complete shit show we saw over the last few years. You're the one muted now, Bryce.
I'm the one. Sorry about that. John brings up one here. To be real, Boy Mafe fell off a cliff after his injury. And then we got Benglish here going, I would not give up on Mafe. He's an interesting one because, I get he's young, but if you were to have to maybe try and acquire somebody like for the offensive line on the other side, you may have to give up a piece, and he's young enough that, but I would rather see Boye stay here and develop a little bit more. But the thing, like you said, the guys for me that really stood out and I think have helped solidify some of the core of this defense are the Kobe Bryants, the Derek Halls. Like, everyone was ready almost to write off Derek Hall after last year and just how he did absolutely nothing as a second-round pick. Shows a little bit more about what the scheme was asking him to do versus what Mike Macdonald asked him to do and how much better it fit him in this new scheme. Reek Woolen's the interesting one to me because I agree. Reek, when he plays and is locked in and focused, he is one of the better corners in the NFL, hands down. But when you're one of the better corners of the NFL, we shouldn't be saying like, even having your coach come out and say, hey, he needs to be focused. He needs to, that's the worrisome part for me. When you look at a guy like we were talking about earlier in the season, when Lenore got his contract extension, you're kind of in a point where that's kind of where he's looking to get his money, is what Lenore got in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I feel comfortable paying Riq Woolen that when he struggles with giving it his all every game, all the time, being locked in. I don't know if if someone comes and asks about Riq and offers you a 3rd round pick potentially, or something like that, if it doesn't become an entertained, kind of conversation in Seattle. They did draft Nehemiah Pritchett, who didn't play much, but from all intents and purposes, they seem to like. It is a pretty good corner class. They could get somebody else in this draft as well to, play opposite. And like you said, Job played well, and Trey Brown's still around, even though he kind of had an off year. Might help you in the fact of trying to keep him here on a cheaper deal as Trey Brown. And if you do get that offer, maybe you do move on from Riq Woolen. The inside, like, I would re-sign Jaron Reed. I think he allows Leonard Williams to be more useful on passing situations and not having to play the key. And same with Robertson Harris. I think you need to rework his deal and bring him back, but he did come in and play well in what his role was. The one thing for me that I want to see them do is they have to get a nose tackle to get Byron Murphy out of that nose tackle role in the defense. Mm-hmm. I'm okay on passing downs if that's where you put Byron Murphy when it's 3rd and long and you know that they're going to throw, and that's going to give you like a NASCAR package in a way, but not when it's 1st down and 2nd down and he's in there. Like, I feel like for where we drafted him and what his impact is and could be, I think he needs to be able to be more flexibly moved around that D line and not have to take as many snaps at nose tackle.
Yes, that is very true. I think they need bigger bodies up front.
They do.
Williams is not a big interior lineman. And then Cameron Young, I am pretty sure, has got no future in Seattle. He's on IR for the 2nd year in a row, and he does almost nothing. Mike Morris, I like the idea of Mike Morris, but like in preseason versus regular season, it's pretty clear that he also might have some limitations as to why he doesn't play more often. Yeah, they're kind of like two things here. One, I would like one of these edge rushers, and I'm actually believing that it's more Hall than Mafe, to not get their sacks and pressure so heavily off of winning up through speed. Like just bend, and get that Jared Verse type of pass rusher. I'm not saying that they should take in Verse over Murphy. It made more sense to get Murphy, given what Seattle needed versus what the Rams needed. But to watch a pass rusher just run over a tackle's, like a Mack truck, like that's the type of pass rush that I'm looking for, in addition to somebody who can win with speed, like that extra strength factor. And we've seen Derek Hall do it. I mean, in that Lions game where I think it was Taylor Decker that he went up against, and he drove him back and then just one arm grabbed Goff and threw him to the ground. Like, that was extremely impressive. So yeah, they could tinker that defensive line a little bit more, get a bigger body for run stuffing purposes, especially, and somebody who isn't Hankins, basically. But that, that's not a top priority, and it's also generally an inexpensive, road.
I just don't want to see them do the Jonathan Hankins thing at that nose tackle spot again and try and eke out the years on some older player. Like, go get a younger player that can be there and be more of a impact, because as much as Jonathan Hankins has been an impact in his NFL career, he wasn't really this year. Like, you think of like the Ataba Rubens that we went out and got, Kevin Williams, Tony McDaniel, guys like that actually, the Seattle really, like, to be honest, one of the perfect roles in this defense, one of the perfect guys for it would be a Brandon Mebane type. Like, yes. If you had Brandon Mebane playing in there and were able to move Murphy around with Leonard, like, Brandon Mebane would fit this defense so well in Seattle, the way it is constructed now. Not that he didn't fit Pete's well, but this one has a specific role he could do very well. That's the type of player you need in the middle of that defense to free up Byron Murphy, Leonard Williams, Jaron Reed, all those kind of guys. But I do agree with a lot of our, comments here that we do need another impactful rush. And I don't know if Chenna will be here unless it's restructured based on his injury history and, a bunch of other things for him. So it'll be interesting to see if they bring Chenna back on a restructured deal. Maybe they go out and acquire somebody. Like, I think one of our viewers in here put an interesting one in. Here it is. Ian Victor, who's always in our chat. Would Trey Hendrickson be someone that you'd be interested in bringing in? Yeah, I don't know how well he fits Macdonald's style and that edge role, but he would be an interesting conversational piece for sure if he's available to have, because he has great production there in Cincinnati.
He's got a year left on his deal, so like bringing in means trade or the Bengals cut him,
right?
And like he wouldn't be cheap in that sense because I believe he leads the league in sacks still. If it's not him, then it's Garrett, and he's going to enter his age 31 season. So that would be one of those moves where like we're trying to win now. If you're adding in Hendrickson, so if he's here, I'm not going to complain about that because he's a really good player. But yeah, the defensive line just needs a little more tweaking. And to get back to Woolen for a second, if they keep Woolen, fine. But this is like a make it or break it contract here.
Yes.
And regardless, I think that outside corner is still probably going to be a need because there is no way around the fact that Job and Trey Brown are going to have physical disadvantages in ways that Woolen will not. And while Witherspoon is not a big corner in terms of height or even weight, he is such an incredible athlete and so speedy that he can keep up with a lot of guys in the slot. And hopefully they can move him around outside a little bit more often too. So Pritchett, we'll see how he develops, but he didn't get a lot of run. But to me, much like you can never draft too many receivers, you always have to stock up on cornerbacks because there are just too many damn good wide receivers to deal with. So if they can find another corner whom they like, then give it a shot. This is one of those things where it's not to cut Rick Woolen or anything or trade him for nothing, but his starting spot shouldn't be an absolute lock for 2025 to the point where like they don't even bother to add any other cornerback help. So like Spoon, safe. That other spot, even still, I bet you there's going to be competition for Josh Jobe. But there are moments where if the pass rush doesn't get home, and I'm pretty sure statistically, Seattle's defense is not rated well when they don't generate pressure. And I think that speaks a lot to some of the issues in the secondary. So just having that synced up a little bit better would be key. But again, isn't it relieving to not be talking about the defense in such a flagrantly negative way? Like, yeah, there's no pass rush. The linebackers are old and or bad. The secondary just blowing coverages every other week. The turnaround for the bye week to now, absence like, the Packers game, first half of the Packers game and some of the Vikings game, is about as much as you could possibly ask for out of a first-year head coach who is known for defense and, unlike Brandon Staley, is actually delivering in year one.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's nice to be like, how do we make this defense better? Not, God, our defense is horrible. How many, we need to revamp it, overhaul it, like we've been saying for the past couple seasons. It's more of a, okay, what do we add? What do we tinker with in this recipe? Just give it that extra punch and that extra, flair to it. It's definitely a refreshing conversation to have. So let's get into some of the other topics we've got tonight, Mookie, and this one we'll make short because we already touched on it a little bit in the preview to the Rams game. But Geno or not, what do we do about the position? So the way we'll make this quick, and I know our listeners will probably go on about, we've already talked about it. What do you predict will happen before March 20th, which I believe is the deadline for Geno? What do you think the Seahawks do? Your gut feeling right now with the Seahawks and what they'll do with Geno Smith and the quarterback position as a whole going forward?
Yeah, I think it's March 10th that his roster.
March 10th? Okay,
yeah.
It's March 10th.
Yeah, it's sometime in March. Yeah, so before the odds of March. I already see one comment there from, is it IB English or IB English? It could be IB English. Maddie, is that
maybe
Brown? Anyway, there's a part of me that is increasingly thinking that they might cut him just to reallocate resources, so to speak, and start anew there. Look, we've got access to a lot of the fancy stats that show Geno's not been as bad as the touchdown interception ratio indicates, and he's been put in some terrible situations where he is having to carry too much of the load on offense. And short of being a Hall of Fame level quarterback, which he is not, a lot of quarterbacks would struggle under those circumstances. So I just think about the biggest moments of this season. Yes, the 49ers comeback was extremely cool, and it's one of my favorite moments of the season. I mean, that was huge for him. But I think about the most damaging play of the season on offense, and it might be the pick six to Kinchins, where, yeah, the offensive line didn't do a great job, but it was just one of those ill-timed, bad red zone decisions. And then, of course, people will remember the picks in the Vikings game, but whether it's DK's fault or not, but the first pick was terrible. And to me, that was more a problem than the desperation play. So it's like ownership, and maybe Schneider will see these are some ill-timed plays that might have been the difference between making and missing the playoffs, and go, we need to find somebody down the line who can help us win, not just in 2025 possibly, but 5-6 years and beyond to go. So I think I'm 50-50. Like that's a total cop-out answer, but I'm a lot less confident now that they keep Geno than I was a few weeks ago. But if they do keep him for 2025, I believe they will draft a quarterback. They're not going to do this trade thing again. Like, don't bring in another Howell type. I think they will draft a quarterback, and we don't know who it'll be because we still got the college football playoff this week, and some stock might rise like Riley Leonard. Stock might fall for others. And also we've got the combine, which is also another common way for people to rise and fall, and the Senior Bowl, which I am pretty sure that John Schneider has already booked his flight to Alabama, and he's camped out there right now. But yes, quarterback, whether Geno's here or not, you're going to have to change what you have behind Geno, or just change the strategy so that there is a possible long-term option who's young on the team in 2025, and not necessarily just a backup level dude.
Yeah. So for me with this, Mookie, beginning of the year, offseason, I was okay with this being Geno's last year in Seattle. I was very vocal about it. I was kind of intrigued by Sam Howell coming in. As the season progressed and I started to watch Geno more and got the all-22, and we saw this offense kind of go through that early phase where it was really exciting. And then, but some of the interceptions he was throwing, I was going, okay, these are interceptions you shouldn't be throwing at the point in your career that you're at. Like, you should be avoiding those. As the season went on, you saw how bad the O-line got. I was like, okay, there's a lot of pressure. And the thing for me that really changed my opinion of Geno this year was the lack of the run game and even the commitment to run, and asking a quarterback to be first in shotgun rate, highest drop back team, or one of the highest drop back teams in the NFL, and the lowest in running back carries. And it got to a point for me where I'm like, that's a lot to put on a guy, and not give him answers as an offensive coordinator should to the test, which is the defense. The red zone interceptions are worrisome because that's something he's kind of carried a little bit across multiple years now. Not so many as in the first two with Waldron, but definitely this year it spiked dramatically. But my big thing, coming down is I kind of got to I wouldn't be shocked if come the Monday after or right before that March, deadline, Geno Smith is traded or cut by the Seattle Seahawks, and John Schneider moves on because, like we were talking off air, I look at the situation similar to the Mariners, where when Jerry DiPoto came in, he kind of had to take the team as it was and try and win with it. I think Jody Allen and them kind of looked at it the same way with the Seahawks team, is get your new coach, do that, take this roster as currently constructed with Geno Smith and try to win. Go out and do what you can. They finished 10-7. I think it buys John this offseason to fix things. But if he goes to them and says, look, we can't do it with Geno. I need to go younger. I need to go get a guy like you were just alluding to. And we need to take 2 steps back to go 4 steps forward in 2026 and 2027 and 2028. There may be some sort of, situation where that pans out for John, and Geno can go off and find a team that maybe is a little bit more even ready to win than Seattle might be.
Yeah, and that's the thing for me. So I think about the timeline in Seahawks history, and I know it's obviously kind of a stupid, thing to do, but let's pretend Matt Hasselbeck's career happened after Russell Wilson's. I don't think that Seahawks fans would treat Hasselbeck as kindly as they do for the most part now, because before 2005, those are similarly mediocre Seahawks teams. But Hasselbeck was good. Sometimes he'd be a little reckless with turnovers. He didn't have Geno's receivers, that's for sure. But he had a Hall of Fame offensive line and a Hall of Fame caliber running back in the eyes of many with Sean Alexander. So he had other pieces around him to offset the fact they didn't have a superstar wide receiver. But Hasselbeck was also part of why they were 10-6 and 9-7 and scraping by in a pretty weak division. But then 2005 happened, and you could see, you could make a Super Bowl run with Matt Hasselbeck. Yeah, you could have him, be as efficient as possible to have a low sack rate with Hutchinson, Tobeck, and Big Walt, and Chris Gray, and Sean Locklear as your offensive line. You could give it to Sean a million times. He had the running game. He had reliable receivers without them being superstars, and he had a very good Hall of Fame offensive mind in Mike Holmgren. But we've also seen the down years, and they weren't great. And then his decline just was precipitous. So with Geno, he's kind of in that Hasselbeck tier, and he was just the victim of the timing of succeeding Russell Wilson. I feel like any quarterback after Wilson who didn't perform up to the Wilson level, the prime Wilson years, that is, was always going to have some sort of, but Russ could have done this and Russ could have done that. So look, Geno is a great story. If he stays, I'm totally fine with that. I'd love for him to stay, but I'm also not so much of a homer or blind to the possibility that they can move on. And it's also it's biology, man. It's sports biology, so to speak. 35, 36 years old, Geno Smith. So next year and the year after, it's mostly Hall of Fame level quarterbacks and borderline Hall of Fame level quarterbacks and pretty good ones who can keep up that, have high-end productivity. Just because quarterbacks can play deep into their 30s doesn't mean they can play it well. So like Joe Flacco having kind of a decent season in Cleveland despite all of his interceptions, but he's 39 years old, and if you put him on a team that didn't have the number one defense, they're not sniffing the playoffs. So most likely, once Geno's 36 years old, you probably got his best years. So I guess this is a roundabout way of saying he is not a long-term solution just because of his age. It would be different if he was 29 or 30, but just by his age alone, the odds of him being highly productive 2 years from now, it's not particularly high. And I know he didn't play a lot of football because it was in the backup role for 2018, 2019, and so on. But like Rich Gannon was kind of in that same mold. He won MVP in 2002, got injured the next year, and he was done like 2 years later. So, I mean, that could be kind of the closest analog we have for Geno Smith at this point.
No, I totally agree with you on all of what you said there, Mookie, and you can't keep kicking this can down the road and banking on Geno Smith. And that's kind of what John Schneider's done. We're 3 years now removed from Russell Wilson being traded and our franchise quarterback at the time moving on. And there's been no plan. There's been nothing it's been, okay, I'm just going to put this in here and we'll kind of talk about this a little bit. But if you did move on from Geno and you didn't want to go right to a rookie, because I don't look at any of these guys outside of Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, unless John Schneider's going to make some massive play to go up and get Cam Ward, you're going to be, looking at a guy that maybe is a year or two away from starting and being a B+ starter in the NFL potentially. So who are some guys that are maybe current backups, draft busts, or blocked by an elite starter that you would be interested in Seattle potentially going to because they're younger? It allows you to reset the room a little bit and maybe has more upside to them than, say, Sam Howell.
Yeah, it's tough. You got to look at the landscape, and it's not plentiful. I mean, Sam Darnold, with the season that he's having, I think Minnesota would be almost naive to not re-sign him. The odds that J.J. McCarthy is going to give you Sam Darnold's 2024 productivity, it's slim and none. So what do you think is going to happen? They can end up taking a step back for that reason, and they're Super Bowl contenders. So I think they'll keep Darnold. Whether they trade McCarthy is a different story. I don't think they're going to do that either. Like, if Darnold ends up being a one-year wonder, you don't want to throw both out, essentially. But Zach Wilson, I know, has been discussed because he's Bo Nix's backup with Denver. I don't really see the appeal in him at all. Like, a lot of the reason why he was bad with the Jets is because he was also very, very bad. He just does not read defense as well at all. Justin Fields, I know, intrigues some people. No, do not bring back Drew. It's like,
I really wanted to throw this one in there. I know Nate, he loves Drew Lock. I'm in agreement. Do not bring back Drew Lock.
Last week against the Falcons, a not good defense, they had 7 points and Lock looked like a non-NFL quarterback. The fact that Gus Bradley's defense just can make anybody look like a superstar for a day, I mean, it's good for Drew. He pissed off a lot of Giants fans by winning and having the game of his life, but don't bring back Drew. Justin Fields, I know, has intrigued people because of his potential. No doubt, he's one hell of an athlete. He is a very good runner. he is a wildly inconsistent passer, and he takes sacks at an extreme rate. And I think Seahawks fans are more or less accustomed to having quarterbacks take sacks at an extreme rate, and I don't know if I want to see that continue. So you have him. I'm just trying to think of some other backup options.
So I'll give you the list that I've created here,
Yeah.
Mookie, just to kind of give you. So you've talked about Fields, Mac Jones,
Yeah,
Tyler Huntley. I think Aiden O'Connell may be available, especially if they get Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward in Vegas. Will Levis is another one. Someone else before in a previous show threw out Easton Stick. The
Like
one for me on my list that I would be okay if Seattle traded for, and I think they'd have to trade, and they wouldn't probably have to give up maybe a fourth, maybe a third, potentially, just because he is. And guys, Hendon Hooker.
Oh yeah, the Lions back. I mean, he's either going to be good or he isn't, because he's like 27 years old already. So and he's hardly played NFL. Well, I guess you could say he's gotten to play quite a bit this year with all the blowouts the Lions have had this year.
Yes,
but maybe he would have been better for Grubb's offense because it's kind of the same spread concept. But yeah, if they want to take a flyer on him as a backup or like starter potential, I'm sure that Schneider will explore it. But Levis is a hard no for me, just because I tweeted the stat earlier. When he started for Tennessee, his sack rate's 12%. When Mason Rudolph has started, his sack rate's 4%. So Levis seems to have some sort of processing hangup that causes him to take sacks at an exorbitant rate. There's somebody, Mac Jones has not looked terrible in Jacksonville, not as bad as I thought.
Yeah.
And Aiden O'Connell is kind of like one of those. Him and Gardner Minshew and a couple others are kind of like all in the same bucket to me. But O'Connell has shown some moxie, and that's an awful offense, but not totally awful in terms of skill position. Like, he's able to get the ball to Brock Bowers. He's had no issue over the years doing that. But I would imagine the Raiders are going to move on from Minshew. They could move on from O'Connell. So he would be worth exploring, because to my knowledge, O'Connell isn't some sort of, or hasn't been a turnover machine during his time with the Raiders. But I think if Howell doesn't get any run this weekend, that probably tells you enough of how they feel about Sam. And unlike when Drew was here, when he was competing with Geno, Schneider made it very clear that Howell was there to be a backup.
Yes, he did.
That was kind of the hint.
Yeah, and obviously his one showing there against Green Bay and that interception he threw weren't exactly things that make you feel great about his potential. Okay, Mookie, so I'll give you two options on where the show goes from here. We can do some viewer Q&A right now. We got a lot of comments coming in and throughout the show, or we start talking about Ryan Grubb. Pick your poison.
Okay. Well, we might as well talk about Grubb, just from the sense of who is inevitably going to replace him. And I know that the comments are going to be popping off like it's a popcorn machine.
All right, so Grubb or not, and possible OC candidates that we want to see in Seattle if they do move on from him. I've got a couple. Some that I've heard through sources are potential guys that are considerations if they were to move on, guys that they do like. Have you heard anything, Mookie? And what are your feelings about what happens with Ryan Grubb?
To me, I think that Grubb is gone. And whether it's fired or parted ways, it's a matter of how they're going to the verbiage they'll use the day that Grubb is out of here. It just didn't work out. He was not the first option. He probably wasn't even the second option. If he was not the coordinator for the University of Washington, but instead he was coaching the University of Maryland to a national championship game with Penix Jr. and everybody else, I think there would be a different opinion. That it's natural. The local bias is going to creep in. And, it's kind of been a thing, I feel, for much of this season. But he's shown some issues that are beyond just the offensive line. And he doesn't make life easy for the offensive line either, with the frequency that he puts his tackles and out on islands. So I think Grubb is gone. As far as candidates, I've heard about Frank Smith for Miami. And look, Miami has done quite well to go from 2-6 to 8-8 and have fighting chance at the playoffs. But we've seen how creative that Mike Macdonald's offense is. It's not the most physical offense, so that's where I'm kind of wondering about the fit there, whether they would try to copy much of what Miami's doing. Their only super physical dude on that team is Jonnu Smith, whom incidentally I would have loved to see in Seattle. He's the type of tight end, unlike Noah Fant, that I would have loved to see. Someone in the comments, Nate Kushner, going Doug Peterson. We're going to see if Peterson actually doesn't get fired first. So we'll see there. He might maybe he gets a stay of execution, so to speak, due to these back-to-back wins that he's picked up. Jacksonville ending the season on a red-hot streak. Tanner Engstrand, I think, is kind of out of the question because Ben Johnson feels like he's inevitably going to be a head coach. And incidentally, I'm pleased to announce the Lions have beaten the 49ers. So San Francisco, congratulations on your last place finish in the NFC West.
Awesome.
But yeah, I think Engstrand would just get promoted if Ben Johnson becomes a head coach. I've also heard from through the grapevine, Adam Stenavich, Green Bay's offensive coordinator, and I think he handles the run game. So we know Matt LaFleur is the main guy, but if Stenavich can help in any way, I mean, look at that Green Bay offensive line. There's not a single first-round pick on that O-line. They've got multiple day 2 and day 3 guys there, and their running game is good. They've got, to me, not a spectacular receiving group, but they're able to scheme Tucker Kraft and Dobbs and Watson and all those dudes open. And that's what I would want to see out of a Seattle offensive coordinator, where, yeah, you might have the talents with Metcalf if he stays and Smith and Jigba and others. But if you can make ordinary players look really good in your offense, then you're a really good offensive coordinator as far as I'm concerned. So, yeah, Frank Smith, Engstrand. I know there are one or – well, not Engstrand, Stenavich. There are one or two other guys that I'm forgetting, but Kafka. Yeah, if Kafka gets fired or he has to leave because, Daboll gets fired, I think they would go back to Kafka. The only in-person promotion I could see is Jake Peetz, just because of his ties to the Rams as the passing game coordinator, right?
Yes.
So, yeah, he would probably be somebody who's an option, but ultimately, I believe that Seattle needs an experienced offensive coordinator, and preferably somebody who's also called plays before in an NFL level. Because keep in mind, Waldron maybe called like a handful of plays with McVay whenever McVay got bored and let his assistants do his work. And then we know Grubb called plays seemingly at Washington. I'm wondering how much of that he did versus DeBoer tells him what to do. But nevertheless, he called 0 plays in the NFL by virtue of never being in the NFL before. So having someone with prior play calling experience, I think would be preferred, because the way that this worked out, Macdonald probably was so fixated on fixing the defense that having all that time to look at the offense, you're dealing with somebody who is less experienced than you are.
Yeah, no, and I think that's one thing Mike Macdonald will probably change going forward, is his involvement in knowing what the offense is doing, but also relying on a more experienced guy. And the one thing I've kind of heard from people I've talked to is they may lean more to the John Harbaugh, Jim Harbaugh tree, because that's where Mike Macdonald's familiar with. So one name, obviously Greg Roman is not going anywhere, and neither is Moncrief in Baltimore, unless they get head coaching offers. But the one name out of that group that I've heard that there's some interest in behind, who has previous play calling experience and led the number 1 rushing attack the year he was the offensive coordinator, is Marcus Brady. And he's the passing game coordinator currently for the Chargers, and he has been an offensive coordinator. He's been in the NFL for years. I think he's more of a dark horse candidate potentially. Kafka's someone I've heard of as well. Jake Peetz, I hear that they really like Jake Peetz in that building. Mike Macdonald actually really likes Jake Peetz. And he kind of alluded to it, which was weird. I don't know if you caught that on 710 and his Cairo shows that he does on after the games or whatnot. He even brought up a point where he was talking about his chasing edges philosophy and all that. And he was bringing up coaches' names. And he said, during this time getting ready for this Thursday night game, Durday was doing a really good job of bringing us fresh ideas and so on. And he never mentioned Grubb or Scott Huff, but the name he did drop was Jake Peetz. And I went, oh, that's kind of interesting. You're dropping him, but you're not dropping any of your other offensive coordinators or offensive coordinator and offensive staff. Wes Phillips is someone that's interested me. The Minnesota Vikings offensive coordinator is another guy I'd be interested in. And people have talked about Schottenheimer. I've talked about Schotty coming back. Talked about experienced play caller coming back to Seattle and potentially calling plays. The other one that's kind of interested, I wouldn't be shocked if Seattle even went after, is Mike LaFleur.
Yeah.
He's the offensive coordinator in LA right now. He doesn't call the plays, but he has experience doing it. He went to a bad situation with the Jets with Robert Saleh. But when he was in San Francisco, he was highly regarded by Shanahan. When McDaniel left, he took over. They still had a great running game. I would be okay if Mike LaFleur came in. Again, the guys we're talking about have connections to build good staffs around them. They've been in the league for a while, and that's going to be the key. If Seattle were to run it back with someone that has no experience calling plays or, is new to the league, you might as well just run it back with Grubb again and go through the same process. As bad as that sounds, it's basically what you're going to be doing. But yeah, the thing is, if Grubb goes, I think Scott Huff's going to go, and I'm not upset with that. I think that's probably the right move, to be honest. It'll be interesting to see how quickly this change potentially happens, if it does happen, and I think it probably will. Does it happen Black Monday? Does it happen a week after? Kind of, how does it go? Because when Mike Macdonald kind of got asked today, I think by Brian Nimhauser at his press conference, like, what are your thoughts on this? And the whole offseason coming up, he was very quick to respond with, we're not talking about it, but after, our game, we'll kind of evaluate that and get all that figured out in the next week or so. It was like, okay, you really don't want to talk about this right now, Mike, but, people are going to ask you. Those are kind of the guys I see as, potential offensive coordinator fits. Doug Peterson, you brought his name up. I wouldn't be too happy about Doug Peterson coming here. I've never been enamored with his offense at all. But it is what it is. So, the other one, the one I'd be the happiest about potentially, but I don't think it'll happen because I don't think he's ready to do it, is Josh McCown.
Oh yeah, Josh McCown is gone. I mean, we there was talk about him being a head coach straight from retiring as a player. So
yeah,
but so far, and he's with Minnesota, right?
And Kevin O'Connell has basically contributed a lot of Sam Darnold's resurgence here and everything to Josh McCown.
Yeah, and we see how that Minnesota offense is spinning its wheels. And I just want to know, the Vikings play action game is really good, and their running game statistics are not great. So that's your hint there, that you do not need a great rushing attack to have a great play action game. And Minnesota is just one of those standards. There are two other names I thought about because of potential firings or whatever. Clint Kubiak in New Orleans looked like he was suddenly the next big thing after 2 weeks. And then it's not his fault that the whole offense got hurt. And then the season fell apart for New Orleans. They're going to have a new coaching staff. I've had an affinity for Gary Kubiak's style of offense. And I'm wondering if he could be a fit for Macdonald in that sense. I think Gary Kubiak was on Baltimore staff too. And that might have overlapped with Macdonald's time there. So Clint's could be somebody there. And of course, he was with San Francisco. And then he's not coaching right now. And maybe this is a little bit too Peterson adjacent. And as somebody who's repeatedly called Peterson the RPO merchant, it might be hypocritical of me. But Frank Reich, Frank Reich stuff before he was in Philadelphia, I thought he was a good coordinator for the Chargers. And to me, his downfall was that he had too much of a Carson Wentz fetish. And he went from getting the last really good year out of Phillip Rivers in 2020 and a good running game too, to Wentz basically sunk his reputation. And then getting a wash Matt Ryan. Carolina fires coaches at a ridiculous rate. So the fact that Canales is going to see a second year seemingly is a miracle for him. And he should be like the most thankful guy in the world. I've liked Frank Reich's offenses more often than not. And he could be somebody that Seattle targets. But again, this is all dependent on also what Schneider sees for the offense in the long term. And it's going to have to be tied to the quarterback too, right? So.
And that's going to be the interesting thing.
And who's the best coordinator for the quarterback we intend to draft or something like that?
Well, this is interesting. So I'm not even going to try and pronounce that. I don't want to screw it up, but we're just going to call it PH here. Comes in and says, today Brady Henderson voted Pets as Seahawks Assistant of the Year. It's head-scratching choice given the D-line has a potential Defensive Player of the Year candidate, but it seems curious that his name kept coming up. His name has come up a lot through beat reporters and everything over the last, I'd say, month, since the Grubb being potentially moved on from conversation has heated up. His name has come up quite a bit. And I know when we got him from the Rams, I have a close friend and source down there with the Rams that McVay was pissed that Petz left and came to Seattle. He was not happy about it. It was a sneaky good hire by John Schneider and that crew. So I wonder if Amy kind of brings it up here. Petz would make the transition smoother. He's here. Some of the players already know him, and maybe he's already kind of got an idea of how he changed things, and he does come off that McVay tree, but he's called plays in college at LSU. He's been around multiple offenses with, resurgence of Derek Carr when he was with Oakland, Teddy Bridgewater. Like he's had some success throughout the league, and he's been in the league for 15 years. So we talk about experience. He's been around, so he might be able to build himself a decent staff through connections as well, if you were to go with an in-house candidate for say.
Yeah, very possibly Beats gets promoted. If Grubb goes, would Huff go? Is kind of like, are they a package deal? And if Huff goes, then you're on to yet another offensive line coach. I wish I could just bring Dickerson back. I didn't think he was really a liability at all.
I think the talent we gave him was.
The talent was a different story, and he had, not a lot to work with. But 2022, it was probably the last time they had a run game worth talking about. But if Huff goes, then so be it. But with Grubb, I am not saying he can't eventually be a good NFL offensive coordinator, but this is not a experimentation. This is not an experiment room. Like, teams cannot just let him play it out for multiple years and hope he finally gets it. So in Grubb's case, yes, the offensive line hasn't been good, and he's had to deal with some issues there throughout the season. You have a center retiring in the middle of the year. You've had Lucas out for half the year. Then you had the revolving door with Bradford, and then Haynes, and then LeMay, and all that, yada, yada. But when you've got so many route concepts that we can see as just amateur people watching all 22, where it seems like every wide receiver is not just covered, but you could draw a straight line through all of their routes, that is not an offensive line problem. When the spacing is bad, when you're constantly play action, you're play faking to the weak side, but you never run weak side, and you're giving the game away just through too many tells in the formation, that is not an issue of the bad offensive line. That is a you problem. So that's, to me, the biggest reason why Grubb should go. He is neither the first nor the last offensive coordinator Seattle's ever had who has had to deal with a bad offensive line. His results have been the worst by far, because even the bad offensive lines, maybe outside of 2010, could run block a little bit, but they don't have a good running game. They've got a mediocre passing game. And whatever you think of Geno, he's put up better results than he did this year. So to me, this ultimately falls on Grubb, and they pretty much have to move on because of the way that this went on.
So I'm going to just kind of two things here. I'm going to throw this one up as well. They came as a package, but they don't have to be judged that way. We're talking about Scott Huff here. What are your take on Scott Huff? Because I have mine, but I want to hear yours first, Mookie.
I don't hold an overly strong opinion, but it does feel like too often they're having assignment issues, especially in run blocking, where guys are not getting to their blocks or they're running into each other, and it doesn't feel like a particularly well-coached unit. They've figured out some things, like they figured out GT counter everybody. It took until December to figure that one out. But besides that, Huff is another dude who never coached a day in the NFL. And yes, this is another situation where NFL offensive lines versus college offensive lines, it truly matters with that. There are rule differences, particularly say for something like screen passes. You can be 3 yards down the field in college. You can only be 1 yard down the field in the NFL. And we've had a couple of iffy moments with linemen downfield already this year. So I think Huff could very well be on the hot seat too. But if I had to say one goes but not the other, it's going to be Grubb. I haven't heard too much negative about Huff necessarily. So it's just Grubb has exacerbated the issues on the offensive line with predictability and just trying to run an offense that has no rhyme or reason to it. It's almost reactive in a way. I mean, look at that Bears game. We got on Grubb for not running it a lot in the Minnesota game when there were opportunities to run. So what does he do in the Chicago game? We're going to run. It was exactly like the San Francisco Thursday night game, except better results. And then after he had his bag of tricks run out, it became like the second Arizona game. A lot of rushing success in the first half. Other team adjusted. Run game stops working in the second half. So I just feel like he is somebody who does not have counters to the other team's counters.
So for me with Scott Huff, one thing that, I think, and Grubb can be a part of this conversation in that, is when you're in college, you're able to find weaknesses a lot easier and exploit them due to age, due to physical maturity of players. Because, hey, if you get a freshman D tackle in there against your senior guard that's played 3 years, you can abuse that all game long. And that's one thing that I felt, was a big adjustment for Huff and Grubb, is you don't get those advantages as much in the NFL, because the guy that's a 4-string corner, usually the reason he's not starting is maybe he doesn't, have as quick twitch as the guy that is the starter. We talk about Trey Brown versus Reek Woolen in that kind of conversation, the physical limitations, not so much the intelligence or experience, because most of the guys that are still 4-string were starters on their college team. I just think both Huff and Grubb weren't necessarily prepared. I think they thought they could copy paste and, okay, yeah, we're going to have a little bit of a worse offensive line, but these guys are pros, so they're going to be still better than what we expect. No, they were bad. And the problem is your error gap in the pros is so small, it's like a sliver. Mm-hmm. And if you are a sliver bad, you look horrible. And that's what I think has run into Grubb and Scott Huff. So I wouldn't be surprised if Huff's gone as well. I just don't. I would see if Petz came in, he's going to want to bring someone that knows McVay's system, knows that blocking scheme, what they like to do. Maybe Andy Dickerson does come back, potentially. Maybe, we talk about Shoddy coming back. Maybe he's the one that turns around and comes back here, because he's in, I believe, Cleveland, right? That's where he ended up.
Yeah, and I know I'd like to think Stefanski's safe. And if by any chance Stefanski gets fired,
hire Stefanski
immediately. Like,
yes,
when they've been giving him, you can't make chicken shit out of chicken salad. And that offense, the only 2 times it's ever functioned are with a geriatric Joe Flacco and the one good year one really good year Baker Mayfield had. And what do you see? Play action, shot plays, layer concepts, even with a mash unit on the offensive line. So if Stefanski gets fired, bring him over here gladly. But there are probably going to be changes to that coaching staff, because how can you not change stuff when you win 3 games?
Yes,
agreed. I'd be fine with Dickerson coming back, and that'd be another McVay person coming back to Seattle, because he was hired directly from the Rams.
So here's one offensive coordinator. This is the last person I'll throw up here, and it comes from a comment which I think is a really interesting one that I didn't even think of. Byron Leftwich.
Is Seattle going to move to the UFL?
But, we talked about Leftwich did run some good offenses with Tampa Brady. Now, I think Tom Brady was a big helping factor, but he comes off that Arians tree. They do know how to run the ball with Bruce Arians. Like, as much as Arians is known for his deep shots and his, over-the-top throws, he did in Pittsburgh have a good running game. He did have one in Arizona when David Johnson was healthy and going. So, we talk about people, but the more I go through this kind of exercise, and I think it'll become clear, I get a stronger feeling just with how much he's been talked about that it probably will be Jake Peetz that ends up taking over the role as offensive coordinator, just because I find it interesting. His name has been coming up so much with even Seahawks beat reporters.
Yeah. There's a part of me going, like, if this really got messy earlier in the season and they were way out of the playoff hunt,
they might have switched earlier.
Not necessarily fire Grubb, but make Peetz the play caller, because it would have been a surprise to, in the middle of a winning streak, to just say, Grubb, pack up your play sheet, give it over to somebody else. But it would almost feel like the Philly drama last year, where they fired Desai or demoted Desai and gave Patricia the defensive coordinator duties, and that blew up in their face. But it's not unprecedented. I mean, the Ravens won a Super Bowl by firing Cam Cameron in the middle of a playoff season. Well, of course, they won the Super Bowl, but in the middle of the season, they let Jim Caldwell run the offense the rest of the year, and that offense was humming throughout the entire playoff run, and made Joe Flacco wildly overpaid for the rest of his career. But
very, very true.
Yeah, I am excited at the possibility of having a good offensive coordinator with professional experience again. But I know we've complained about every offensive coordinator that's come here for however long since Holmgren left. Holmgren was the de facto OC. Nobody gave a shit about Gil Haskell.
Yeah.
1 year Greg Knapp. And of course, the Moore thing was a disaster. But Jeremy Bates gone in a year. Bevel, he wasn't exactly popular out of the gate, but he also helped develop that Wilson offense and the read option stuff. So I think you should get credit there. But something happened sometime February 2015 that kind of soured public opinion on Bevel for some reason. And
then, I can't recall. There was something of some sort of thing that occurred. I can't remember
one particular play call, and then after 2017, the shoddy thing, like the first few weeks, like that wasn't good. And then they switched to a run-heavy offense. And then Shoddy also had his public opinion soured because of a certain playoff game in Dallas. But then he was back in business during the Let Russ Cook season, right up until teams put a second safety back there, and they weren't as effective the last month or so of the year. And then Waldron, that first week where Waldron had Gerald and everything, 4 touchdowns for Wilson. I was like, oh my God, we got our guy. Take that, McVay. And then in year 2, we got DJ Dallas running Wildcat inside the 10 and going, well, he might not know what he's doing. And then suddenly, well, Gino's revived. Waldron could be a head coach candidate. And then
John comes in with a good one here. Did Grubb score an opening drive TD all year with this script?
0. And not just the fact that it was 0, it's they had 2. Gino got twice.
Yeah.
And they haven't had an opening drive touchdown since like the middle of last season. And I believe that is the longest active streak in the NFL. To me, it's not just the fact that he starts slowly. It's anything that isn't the 2-minute drill is generally disjointed.
Yeah, that's interesting to just think about, like how bad this offense really has kind of been, and we just kind of not noticed it for a while, and the chickens really came home to roost this year with it. But here, let's go into one interesting one here, Mookie. Rookie QB class for Hawks. So let's see, I've got on my list here, and we'll probably double up. Give me your 6 guys you think between rounds 3 and 7 that you think are guys that would be potential candidates for the Hawks to draft that could be starter potential after developing for a year or 2.
I don't know if he's going to declare. Is he even draft eligible? Is Klubnik from Clemson?
He is draft eligible, but from what I've read and heard, he's leaning to going back.
Yeah, you know what's tough about this era of college football is the NIL money that's being thrown around.
Yes.
Are we going to we could either have really stacked quarterback classes like last year's, and you have 5-6 guys in the first round, and then it just happens periodically, or they're going to be stretched out, and not every class is going to be as strong because guys are going to, take that extra year. It's going to be fascinating to see how that impacts the NFL draft pipeline with NIL, just to see who's going to be going and who isn't. Like Drew Allar, I know is somebody you've mentioned. If he's going to stay at Penn State, then, well, he could be the number 1 pick in 2026 if he stays on an upward trajectory. I can see the risk that he's taking in that sense. Riley Leonard, I like his mobility. And to me, if Seattle's going to draft anybody, they have to be a little bit more mobile than Gino, which is to say Gino's got good mobility, but if there is so much value that can be unlocked in an offense when you have a quarterback who is a running threat, that it opens up the playbook. They did that with Gino a little bit in 2022. They obviously can't do it this year, but you can only do that so much and so deep into your career. So I brought up Leonard. Dylan Gabriel got brought up by Michael Shandugar as one of the popular responses for replacing Gino directly. And look, I've joked about Bo Nix and the check down merchant yards after catch merchant at Oregon, but he was really, really good there. Dylan Gabriel before Oregon was not anything impressive. No. Like that, he seems more like a system guy, and he also doesn't, to me, have the physical tools to be an NFL starter. So Rourke didn't look good at all in the playoff game, and that kind of turned me off a bit. But the conditions weren't great. It is concerning that the 2 biggest games Indiana played all year, he didn't look good, and the offensive line didn't look good. But so it's hard to find 6. Kyle McCord is somebody who's intriguing me a little bit more from Syracuse, because he was kind of laughed off at Ohio State, but he's getting the last laugh now, because to me he's better than Will Howard.
Oh, so this is my group of my guys that I've kind of got. So Kyle McCord is on that list. I like Kyle McCord at Ohio State last year, even. Watching what he did at Syracuse this year, he reminds me a bit, watching his film, and I've done a more extensive deep dive throughout the weeks. He's kind of got a little Matt Stafford to him a little bit. That's one guy that kind of popped into my head. Not saying he is Matt Stafford, but he has certain traits that are similar to what Matt Stafford had coming out of Georgia. Will Howard has impressed me lately. Like, he's starting to get better with his throws, and I think part of it is finally adjusting to the system, coming from Kansas State to Ohio State. His test will be this game versus Oregon coming up. Riley Leonard, I've liked. I like his mobility as well. I think he had over 700 rushing yards and like 14 touchdowns this year.
Mm-hmm.
His passing against USC and Texas A&M, I could see some NFL throws. I don't know if he has a huge NFL arm or an elite NFL arm, I should say, but he has an NFL arm. If Jalen Milroe commits to the draft or declares, he's interesting because of his mobility. I'm not sold on him as a passer. I think that needs to be developed. Kind of like if we had taken Anthony Richardson a few years ago, like, hey, you're sitting for a few years and we're going to develop you and then unleash you on the NFL. I'm not sold on Dylan Gabriel. Like, I get the appeal some people have because of what he's done at Oregon, but like, people go, oh, Russ was short. Russ also had amazing mobility for his size and could get out of situations. Dylan Gabriel doesn't have that. There's obviously the talk of Quinn Ewers. He's another one that's on this list for me if you can get him, but he's kind of Jekyll and Hyde. Sometimes you get amazing play. Sometimes you get, I can't believe you're actually starting for the University of Texas and Archie Manning sitting on the bench. The one, though, for me that I'm most intrigued of as of late, because of like how you said Bo Nix, is Jackson Dart.
The Ole Miss quarterback.
Ole Miss quarterback. And he's been in an NFL system with Lane Kiffin, so he understands that type of system. He's mobile enough. He is a bigger guy. He's a guy like him and Kyle McCord kind of sit above everybody for me right now, just because if you brought them both in and they've played a lot of ball, they haven't just been kind of sitting around doing nothing. They played at big programs. You let them sit for a year. They're definitely, I think, an upgrade over Sam Howell. And they could be upside starters when they do eventually get their call in 2 years.
Yeah, it's just looking at who's draft eligible. And let's not forget, Ewers might stay. And that would only weaken the class. And if Texas loses to Arizona State tomorrow, I think that would only encourage him to stay and try and make another push for a title. But Carson Beck being this high up.
That was surprising he declared.
Yeah, I don't understand that because, one, teams are going to be a little concerned because of the injury he suffered. And also him without the superpower of Bowers and McConkey looked very, very ordinary. Now, Georgia's receivers this year are not good, and that's part of the problem. But he is also making some terrible, terrible decisions with the ball, and that concerns me. Ewers, I liked him a lot as a freshman, and now I'm kind of worried that he might not have the arm to be like a high-level NFL quarterback. And there was some stat going around that him passing outside the numbers has been quite ugly compared to, say, Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward. Milroe, to me, is like a stay away because of his inability to be a consistent passer. I feel like that's the Bama reputation boost as far as him even being discussed as a potential high draft pick. Dart, again, somebody I think who can be erratic at times, and I don't want to see Dart necessarily. I like his athletic tools, but I just don't want to think that he's like Matt Corral 2.0,
right?
Because that was his predecessor. But yeah, this is just not a great quarterback class. One thing that we can, I think, conclude, and to circle back on the Geno talk, unless they make some big trade up to get Ward or Shedeur, and that would shock the world, there are really no quarterbacks that obviously look like they should be starting right away from this 2025 class. And maybe even that includes Shedeur and Ward as like they can go right into week one. Because Cam Ward, to me, is a better athlete than Sanders. He is like a whirlwind, but there's also quite a bit of Jameis Winston in his game. And that's good and bad, because those near picks that he's throwing in college and like throw it up for grabs, those are absolutely picks in the NFL. So yes, this is just not a great class. And if anything, if Schneider sees it that way, then they may let Gino stick around for 2025 and go try and get somebody late.
And
then
I would be okay with that, Mookie. Like, I'd be okay with Gino staying and we draft Kyle McCord or Jackson Dart. And I'm like, okay, so you've attempted to the bridge. You have now walked out onto the bridge, and there is potentially another side to that bridge. We've left the Gino side of the bridge, and we're standing in the middle looking at the Jackson Dart or the Kyle McCord side, and we're starting to walk that direction. That's what I want to see. Right now, it's like you look out at the Gino Bridge and you look across, and it's just an abyss. There's nothing there. That's exactly how it feels right now. Like, I'm standing out looking over going, there's a fog. Is there anything there? And you're scared to take that step because you don't know what it is. I want to see that other end of the bridge be a draft pick guy. And if you know what, if it doesn't work with one of those guys, draft another. Like, start just swing. And like, I was listening to Dan Vians and Brandon Kane today, and Brandon Kane's like, well, he was talking about it, and he was kind of saying that, there needs to be some value to what you're doing. You have to, at this point now, start to find the solution. Gino's not the problem, but he isn't the solution. You need to find the solution. And that's what I'm worried about with John Schneider. So we're going to go one more question topic here, and then we're going to get into viewer questions because we've been here for about almost an hour and a half. Last one. Grade John Schneider's first year post-Carroll. A, B, C, whatever grade you want to give.
C+. And this would have been closer to a failing grade if he didn't make some significant moves in the middle of the season. So like the free agency class, terrible. I mean,
worst ever.
Yes, it is among the worst ever. George Fant, I can accept as bad luck. Like, he was perfectly logical insurance signing for Lucas, and he got hurt. And he doesn't have, outside of the ACL tear in Seattle, I think 1 year with the Jets, he doesn't have some incredibly deep injury history to have foreseen that. But I just think about the other, Farrell Brown. What a signing. I mean, he is up there with Ed Dixon among the worst tight end signings they've ever had. And then I'm just trying to think of others that they've had. Dotson and Baker were obviously not good enough, and they were shipped out mid-season. Hankins was just okay. There were some dudes that didn't even, like that Rams offensive lineman, they straight up cut before August. So they got almost nothing out of this free agency class. Like, Rayshon Jenkins was their best free agent pickup in theory. And then again, like a bit part player. So free agency, not good. The draft, I think, was better than I expected. And that's why I'm leaning towards a passing grade with a C+. So Murphy might not have had great stats, but the depth is what surprised me. Like, I did not expect AJ Barner to be this good as a receiving option right away. And if he can continue to work on his blocking, they've got tight end one lockdown.
Yes.
So Christian Haynes, to be determined. We'll see what happens in year 2. And if they fire Huff and they have a new offensive line coach, maybe that's kind of like a lifeline for Haynes. But if a new guy says Haynes isn't strong enough to play at guard, forget it. But there are other picks. Barner, of course, I already mentioned. Tyrese Knight, the fact that McDonald's went tonight and they jettisoned both Dotson and Baker and put Knight into the starting lineup, and he's looked quite good, better than I expected. That's a positive. So yeah, the draft has produced some bonuses, I guess you could say, because I thought it was going to be a top-heavy draft. And of course, Lomea and Drell have gotten starting experience too. So we'll see how they develop over the years. The in-season trades, I mean, Robertson Harris been a good addition, and he was like a 2026 6-round pick. I mean, that's nothing. If they want to restructure his contract, fine. If they want to cut him, fine. And then you've also got Ernest Jones, and that's when I think Schneider's at his best, is finding those gems mid-season, whether it's him or Quandre Diggs or certain Marshawn Lynch or a more established player Leonard Williams or Dwayne Brown. He seems to have that knack for mid-season trades in ways that he doesn't necessarily have that same success with standard offseason trades. The coaching staff, I think he's got to be graded for, because he picked Macdonald, and I'm generally satisfied with Macdonald's first-year performance. Grubb is going to result in demerits on his grade, but if I could give him any bit of slack, is the fact that the hire happened so late that they cornered themselves a tiny bit. But yeah, it wasn't the best, but it wasn't absolutely franchise-damaging bad. But it also wasn't so incredible that he's off the hook for 2025. Like next year can't be another C+ offseason. He has to significantly adjust how he approaches free agency if Seattle is thinking about serious contention. Like if you sign 8 players and they don't amount to much and they cost collectively $45 million or whatever, I would rather have 2-3 potentially very good players for $45 million than just accumulating from Dollar Tree. And because to me, it's the value you're getting. And these 1-year contracts are just not panning out. I'd be shocked if Seattle got any comp picks out of the free agents that they managed to get. So.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely be shocked if they do either. I kind of am in the same boat. I give them a C+ for year 1 without Pete. But if it's the same thing next year, I think John Schneider's not going to be the GM come the 2026 offseason. I think he'll be gone. You touched on basically everything I was going to say, Mookie, so I don't have much to add in that regard, but I would agree it's a C+ grade. Yeah. This is really a make or break offseason for John. I think John knows that too, and that's why I think it's more interesting to know, like, if they are to move off Gino, what is John's, okay, you've made this decision, where are you going with it now? Like, what is your plan here? But we'll see. And so with that being said, we've been on this for an hour and 26 minutes. We've got 735 people watching. The chat's been going nuts the entire time. So let's get into our viewer Q&As. So with that being said, I'll throw in some of our starred ones that I kind of hit off the top. So Corey was in here. Hey, Corey, how's it going, man? Amy's got a good one right off the bat here from earlier. What is the maximum package you would give to Gino before you told him to walk? He doesn't seem to have much leverage, but he is full of pride.
Like 2 years or 3 years, and it's kind of like realistically a 2-year deal, or even a 1-year deal with like an out in year 2. What is he on, 30 million right now?
And if he hits his incentives, he's at roughly, I think it'll be 29 is what his contract would end up finishing at this year. I remember Brady talking about this morning. I didn't hear the whole convo, but I think it was at 29. I think if Gino came back, you'd have to give him 35 because if he'd hit all of his incentives, he would have been somewhere up there. So,
yeah, so I'd be like 35 million is the maximum. And just to note, I do not think that Gino on the current contract has a great trade value. So to me, it's either he's either kept and extended potentially, or kept somehow runs his contract out, or he's cut. I don't see a big market for Gino as a trade piece. If he gets cut, I don't think he's just going to languish and not get signed. But I think he gets signed pretty quickly. However, it would be like a 3-year deal, but functionally like another 1-year deal, or even maximum 2 years, and 35 million a year. If it's anything like Albert Beer was talking about, Gino wants a long-term extension. Sorry, unfortunately, as much defending as we could possibly do with your statistics, it's kind of hard to ask for that much money, especially at his age and also with the way this season has gone. So that's about as much as it could go.
Agreed. So Greg Allen comes in with, is Hal going to get a shot at all ever?
Well, it depends on whether or not Macdonald.
If they're blowing out the Rams, maybe this weekend he does. Like if they're up big at halftime, maybe they do, and Gino's hit some of his incentives. Maybe Hal gets in. But it just, to me, I don't think this coaching staff likes what they invested in Hal. I really don't. I think even John Schneider might be kind of looking at it going like, I might have missed on this one. Guys, sorry. Like he's not. Like, that was a really bad showing versus Green Bay. I've tried to go back and justify him coming off the bench, but that interception he threw, like, that was as basic cover 2 as you can play in the NFL, and he threw it right and almost hit, like, literally hit the linebacker in the face mask. Yeah. Like, that to me was just like, how do you throw that? Like, so I don't know. He may get a shot. I don't know if he ever will truly get a shot to be a starter again in the NFL. I think he may be a backup journeyman going forward.
He's probably at that level. And let's not forget, he sat the first year at Washington. So this is not his second year. He sat the first year behind, I forgot.
Alex Smith.
No, it wasn't Alex Smith. It was somebody else in 2022. It was like Heineke or somebody.
Oh, that's right. It was Heineke. Yes, you're right. Sorry, it was Heineke.
So like Wentz, Heineke, he was the third quarterback. And then he started over Brissett last year. Yeah. And, bad circumstances, but he was not good. And then this year, he's definitively the backup to Gino. And I tell you what, if John does not get this offensive line right, on what planet do you think that Sam Howell is going to be any bit productive in 2025? So he's probably not going to get a super shot. He's to me, he belongs on an NFL roster. It's just that he's not anything special. He doesn't have any special traits other than a gunslinging mentality. Which, gunslinging mentality, if you're Josh Allen, maybe pre-2024 Josh Allen is great. But if all you can do is gunsling, and you don't have anything special about you physically, then it's probably going to lead to a lot of heartburn for fans.
This is true. IB English comes in with, we giving DK $30 million a year on the re-up?
Oh, yeah. So, look, I think that they will keep him, and I think they will extend him. But if there are trade offers that
are good,
I don't think he's going to get a first-round pick.
No.
And for the people who don't like DK, you can't have it both ways. You can't go, DK sucks, he's overrated, he's got stone hands, this and that, and then go, yeah, if we can get a first-round pick for DK, well, come on, man. So that's not how this works. And also, better receivers than DK, even in a similar age or even slightly older, more accomplished receivers have not been fetching first-round picks lately. So I think he'll be in that $30 million a year range, but Lockett's probably gone. So
what was Tyler's cap hit this year in all?
I can't remember. It might be $1 million, but
it was. Next year's cap hit is roughly kind of in this range, I think, or in the mid-20s, I think it was the way that they worked it out. But
18.895.
So I don't know. I look at DK. I think he's going to be back. I think they'll give him a contract where he'll be able to hit the open market again before he's 30. And you know what? But if there's a trade that comes calling and it's multiple picks and, second, maybe a second and a fourth or something along those lines, or a second, a third and a fourth, whatever it may be, I think there's a conversation that may be had. But the thing for me that's worrisome about that is everyone wants to anoint JSN receiver one. I believe JSN's a really good receiver, and I do think he's probably the better route running receiver on this team. He is. But his weaknesses are what kind of DK's strengths are, which is being the big physical burner over the top. That's not JSN, and they work well off of each other. I think DK, his best years came with Shoddy. Those were some of his best years when Schottenheimer was here, and he was, letting DK do what he did well, develop. I want to see a guy that knows what DK is and how to use DK off of now what JSN is, and not have it where you unlock one and then you lock the door on the other one, because that's basically what's essentially happened here.
Yeah. The risk you have with dealing DK and not keeping Lockett is JSN wide receiver one. Who is your wide receiver two? And Bobo, you're out of your goddamn mind. So it's not going to happen. I still want them to draft receivers plural in this year. It's not as great a receiving class on paper as the previous seasons, but I feel like they need to diversify the wide receiver skill set and not have guys overlap each other too much, because I think JSN does a lot of what Lockett does.
Agreed. So Corey comes back in. He goes, didn't like Dugar's narrative on his latest article that the team is still mediocre. The defense hasn't taken massive steps forward, or the defense hasn't taken a massive step forward, and the team has a chance for 10 wins. I saw his title of his article today, Michael Sean Dugar's. I kind of was rubbed a little the wrong way with it, because I'm going, when he said they failed, the defense improving to what it is now at the end does not scream failure to me. I didn't expect, Mike Macdonald to come in here and take us to a Super Bowl. That wasn't my expectation. So I don't know how you classify this as a failure. Can you maybe explain it, Mookie?
I don't think it's a failure of the season, and I haven't read the article yet, and I love Michael Sean's work, but I still think it is a mediocre team. And let's flip it the other way around. 2022, 2023, you could say Seattle, well, maybe more 2022. Seattle had a good offense, piss poor defense. That averages out to 9-8, mediocre team. Last year, Seattle had an inconsistent offense, but they're still 11th in points per drive, and the other 10 teams above them made the playoffs. Really piss poor defense, the single worst defense of the Carroll era, 9-8. That's a mediocre team. This year, the defense is just on the fringes of top 10. I think it's a defense that's good enough to make the playoffs. At least this post-bye week version has been good enough to make the playoffs. And even the pre-bye week version was good enough to stymie rookie Bo Nix and Skylar Thompson, all that. But the offense dropping off as much as it did, and the special teams being a complete liability for so much of the year, that comes out to mediocre even at 10-7. And it's not just the fact that they're missing the playoffs, but this isn't college, of course, so there's no resume at stake here, but it kind of is a resume situation when you lose in a strength of victory tiebreaker. If Denver does not win their final game, Seattle will have no win. And of course, Seattle, if they lose to the Rams, for example, Seattle will have no wins over a 10-win team this season with ample opportunity. Like they played Minnesota and lost. It's a close game, still a loss. Played Green Bay, got the doors blown off of them. Played Detroit. I know the defense was badly injured. They still lost, pretty comfortably, but and they lost badly to. Did I mention Buffalo already?
No, but that's a fair one too. Buffalo's another one.
Humiliation. So, like, they don't have and have not had very good wins over the last few seasons. And I mean, I've looked it over, and this is not a slight on Geno, but it might be a slight on the Geno era of Seahawks football and how mediocre it's been.
True.
They have only 2 wins over eventual division champions. It could increase to 3 if Atlanta somehow wins a division. That's 2 over a 3-year span. And of course, Detroit was last year. And I actually forgot the other one off the top of my head. Actually, that even goes back to like 2020, 2021. So you can be mediocre in different ways. The defense is not mediocre, but the team is still functionally mediocre in the sense that they have not proven they can beat really good teams yet. And they're still good enough to beat most of the bad teams, but still are prone to dropping games like the Giants won.
No, and that's very, very fair. And so, I'm just reading something here on the side here, Mookie. I just saw this come out from on X. So quarterback Brock Purdy, who, everyone's talking about because he's, Mr. Irrelevant, cheap, can make it work, get a quarterback, will undergo an MRI on his surgically repaired elbow on Tuesday. He said his arm didn't feel great, describing it as on fire, and he was unable to throw on the sideline. UCL test hour came back fine. Kyle Shanahan said it might be a nerve injury, but tomorrow we'll tell the full story.
Yeah, he got injured again while I was kind of looking. He took some awkward hits. It was either on a sack or he got hit, but Josh Dobbs finished the game. If there's something for Seattle, it's the state of the NFC West is very much impressive.
Yes.
You don't know how many more years you're going to get a Stafford playing like this. And the Stafford after this Bills game has been begging to be intercepted like 8 times, and for whatever reason, the other guys are not catching it. That's part of why Seattle's at home. But at some point, the Rams are going to have their own Matthew Stafford succession plan. And spoiler alert, it is not Jimmy Garoppolo. It is not Stetson Bennett. San Francisco, they're probably going to have to move on from a lot of dudes because credit card bill is due on some of their expensive players, and they might be gone from Debo. They may or may not be paying Brock Purdy $60 million a year. And Arizona just seems to be kind of on the rise, but I feel like Kyler Murray is kind of a mid-level quarterback at this stage. So if you're feeling down at the moment, I know it's not been a strong NFC West, and Seattle kind of threw the division away consequently, but there is still a path for Seattle to be a really good team and a playoff team just by virtue of their division rivals could just take significant steps back, meaning San Francisco and Los Angeles. Now, the Rams defense, they've kind of recreated Aaron Donald in the aggregate, and they got some great picks on the defensive side of the ball. But that offense, if Stafford has an accelerated decline or something, or he just decides to retire and they don't have an adequate replacement, as great of an offense of mine as McVay is, you can only do so much with a lesser quarterback. So that's just something to keep in mind down the line. It's about damn time this division finally got bad again. I mean, like, Seattle got to play their best years with a gauntlet of a division where every team was competitive, even the Jeff Fisher Rams. I don't mind if the division goes back to Seattle is really good, but the rest of the division is sorry.
Agreed. Guys, there's 747 of you in here. Please like and subscribe to the show. It really helps us. We're trying to push to get over 1,000 here. We're so close. We're over 950. Once we get over 1,000, it really helps us with, our show, our channel, getting us great guests like Mookie on the show. So I'm going to throw up another one here, Mookie, from the listeners. Nate comes in with a guy I'm not high on, but wonder if he could be decent for Seattle would be Kenny Pickett.
To do what?
I would assume come in and replace Geno.
Yeah, that's not happening.
No, I don't think so. Watching Pickett, yeah, I saw he did well with the Eagles yesterday until he got knocked out of the game again. I just don't like his durability, and I don't think, if we're gonna move off of Geno, I'd rather go to, potentially a Sam Darnold where you still have the experience, you reset the, age room by 10 years almost, and you still draft somebody. The thing for this whole process for me, like I said, that abyss in the bridge, I need to see it to a young quarterback that could be here for 10 years potentially as my, because we talked about it, earlier, and everyone's talked about it. Quarterbacks don't always stay on the same team like they used to, where they were there for 20 years of their career, their entirety of their career spent with one organization. But if you can get 10 out of your drafted quarterback of 7 solid starting seasons, that's really good now when you draft a quarterback and, have them in your system. So, that's kind of my, thoughts on that. Nayu Gasha comes in here. He says he is tanking QB got a top 10 pick.
I guess it's Sam Howell, Washington.
Yeah.
Well,
they got a top 10 pick. Yeah, but I don't know if I want to see this team tank. That's the thing for me. Like, there's so many things about that can set your organization back in the wrong direction. And the other thing with this moving off Geno is you look at a team like the Vegas, like with the Raiders, they moved off. Everyone wanted Derek Carr gone, and they moved off Derek Carr, and they're now in QB purgatory, and hopefully they solve it this year with either Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward. But sometimes moving off of your guy, like we've said, like Geno can't be the answer, but he can help you get to the answer. And that's the key thing. John Schneider has to start going for the answer.
The roster is too good to tank unless they really strip this down over the next few months and make me look like a right idiot. But like, if you have JSN and you've got supposedly 2 good starting tackles, and you have Charbonnet and Walker running back for another year, and you have all those guys on defense, they better not be like a 3-4 win team next season, barring a million injuries, which of course you don't want to happen. Like, this roster is too good to tank. It's just a matter of finding a higher ceiling instead of just this really high floor that they've had for a while. Schneider has never had an issue having a high floor with this team. Even the year him and Pete came in and just did extreme makeover Seahawks edition.
Oh, but Mookie, did we lose you here? Or did I have some technical issues?
You're frozen. I think I'm fine because I'm moving around. So you're frozen. It's kind of fitting. We've been here an hour and 40. One of us is going to have technical difficulties at some point. Yes, it appears he's having technical issues. So anybody else got any comments? I also see Newgash here saying Stafford's retiring the last 4 years. According to Seattle fans, he's less than 2 years older than Geno. Yeah, but Stafford also had like serious back issues. So yeah, as you notice, it's just me on the screen right now. I'm sure Bryce will pop back in. There better not be some sort of storm, because that's the second time that's happened to us. Many of you who might be tuning in for the first time, we actually had to abort a show a few weeks back because Bryce was in the middle of a bad rainstorm or windstorm or something like that. So we tried to do a live stream for 20 minutes and we had to kill it and then record the next day. So hopefully we don't have to do that again. Brendan asks, and I forgot how to promote comments here, but if JJ McCarthy was available for trade, would you give up a first-round pick for him? No, I don't think that McCarthy is available for trade. So it's nothing that is crossing my mind at the moment. I think Minnesota will be wise to keep both Darnold and McCarthy, at least for the next year. And then Justin Rockstar saying, I think Jake, having said it multiple times, I think Jake Browning could be a good pickup. Browning wasn't too bad during his backup time in Cincinnati behind Joe Burrow. I think he's still the backup there. I'm not entirely sure because Burrow has pretty much played every snap. But obviously, again, University of Washington ties. But he might be worth a flyer. He's certainly a gutsy quarterback, and he kept Cincinnati reasonably afloat in the playoff hunt. But, I mean, Cincinnati's also got a lot of offensive skill position weaponry that Seattle doesn't really match it the same way. And then we could bring back Fitzmagic from retirement.
Let's not do that. Sorry about that, everyone. I just had a small random glitch issue here. it like shut down my whole system for some reason. I don't know what my computer was doing. Sorry, Mookie.
Don't worry, I held down the fort. We didn't have to.
Oh, excellent. I'm never worried, Mookie. Whenever I have a tech issue and you're on the show, I'm never concerned about it. So,
that's kind of like the hints that we should eventually call it. I think
so. I think we're getting to that point. So, Mookie, I want to say thank you again for coming on the show, doing your, weekly segment here, bi-weekly segment with us. And just, we've had conversations, everyone. This is something we're going to keep going through the off season. We're going to keep this show going. Mookie's going to come on. We're going to dive into all the off season topics. And we'll get Mookie over on our new show, which if any one of you was checking out Dan Vian's Seahawks Forever crossover special last night, me and Dan have decided to get together and do a draft focused show called The Pick Is In. And it'll be more overall draft focus, not so much Seahawk driven. It'll stream on both of our channels when we go live, but this is an ability for us to really dive into the draft, give you guys all the draft content that you deserve. And, we will talk Hawks on it. Each episode will kind of lay out guys that we're interested for Seattle, but the main focus will be deep diving into prospects, other teams, especially within our own division here. We'll get guests like Mookie on that have their background and their thoughts on draft picks and stuff like that throughout. And guys, also go help Dan out. He has credentials to go to Senior Bowl this year, and it would be huge to help him get down to Mobile and go to the Senior Bowl. It gives him a great opportunity to build his brand and what he's doing with Seahawks Forever, as well as our show that'll be starting some point between January and February here, which is The Pick Is In. Mookie, outside of that, let everyone know where you guys can find, your field goal stuff, what you guys have coming up now that the off season's around the corner, and stuff that you're going to be up to.
Yeah, at Field Gulls on X, and I guess Blue Sky, fieldgulls.bsky.social, whatever incredibly long address you want to give. You know how to find it. At Mookie Alexander for me on the Bird app and also on the other Bird app. And we're also on Facebook on Field Gulls Facebook. I think it's facebook.com/fieldgulls. So as far as off-season stuff, we'll work that out. Probably going to have a lot of draft scouting to do. But I'm not sure we're going to be doing a lot of previewing of this Rams game, but we are going to be kind of doing a lot of previewing of the offseason to come. This is going to be a fascinating offseason for different reasons, because we didn't expect the Pete firing, and it was a firing. We didn't expect that last year. It caught us off guard. I sure as hell didn't have a pre-write for it. I wasn't even home when that happened. But this year is going to be different for a variety of reasons, including potentially a new offensive coordinator, potentially moving on from some legends like Tyler Lockett, the Geno decision. Are they going to keep DK? Are they going to extend him? All that stuff. There's so much to figure out over the next few months to see if Seattle is going to pick a timeline. Like they're kind of in this 2 timeline thing where they want to rebuild and they want to compete at the same time. Well, let's see what they're going to do. Are they going to make a serious push to compete for a deep playoff run, or are they going to risk taking a step back in the short term to be great in the long term? Either way, I am not down on the team. I'm disappointed with the way the season has gone, with the way that the season ended more than not the season as a whole. But there were still quite a bit of positives that we can build upon heading into next season, such that Seattle isn't mediocre anymore.
Yeah, no, I think this will be an even more far interesting off season for Seattle than last year. And obviously it was huge with Pete being gone and the whole hiring of Mike Macdonald. I'm more interested to see what Mike Macdonald's first true off season looks like, and John Schneider's together, and how that kind of pieces itself together. Mookie, again, thank you so much for coming on, doing this show with us. It's been great for the channel. And guys, again, please help us get to 1,000 subs. It means a lot to me and Ryan. So just go down, sub, share this with your friends. And guys, if you haven't already, go to the HawksZone, go to www.HawksZoneRundown.com. It's our merchandise store. We've got hats. We've got a new logo that's come out on t-shirts and hoodies, toques. Get over there, buy yourself some gear, and we will see you guys on Friday when we have our next guest on, which will be Dana O'Gorman from the Turf podcast coming on. She's going to come on, break down the Rams game coming up. And then we also have our live post-game show following the Rams game on Sunday with Dan Viens coming over from Seahawks Forever. So a couple cool shows coming up in the next couple of days here, guys. But everyone have a happy New Year. Mookie, you as well. Have a good New Year's Eve. Have a happy New Year, and we'll see you guys all in a couple weeks.
All right, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.